The Galactic Assembly had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. It was a union of 847 different alien species, all working together under one government. They believed in peace, trade, and talking through problems. War was almost forgotten. Most species could not even remember what a real battle looked like. Every new species that was discovered in space was invited to join. The assembly would offer them amazing gifts, advanced technology, access to trade routes across thousands of worlds, protection from any threat, medical knowledge that could cure almost any disease. No species had ever said no to such an offer. Why would they? It was the best deal in the universe. Then humanity was discovered. A border patrol ship detected strange signals coming from a small yellow star on the edge of the Orion Arm. When they investigated, they found a young species that had just learned to travel faster than light. These creatures called themselves humans, and they came from a blue planet called Earth. The collective immediately sent word to the assembly. A new species had been found. First contact protocols were activated. Ambassador, one of the most experienced diplomats in the galaxy, was chosen to welcome the humans into galactic civilization. Was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 eyes. He had been a diplomat for 300 years. He had welcomed dozens of new species into the assembly. He knew exactly what to say and how to say it. This mission would be simple, he thought. Just another primitive species eager to join the galactic community. His ship, the Eternal Accord, traveled to the edge of human space. He sent a message announcing his peaceful intentions. To his surprise, the humans agreed to meet. A small vessel arrived within hours. It was called the Wanderer, and it carried the human diplomatic team. Studied them as they came aboard. They looked fragile compared to most species. Soft skin, only 2 eyes. They walked on 2 legs and had 2 arms. Nothing about them seemed special or dangerous. Their leader was a woman named Carter. She had dark hair with streaks of gray, and her face showed the lines of someone who had lived through difficult times. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She moved with quiet confidence. Behind her walked a younger man named Moore, who watched everything with careful attention. Welcomed them to the meeting room. It was a beautiful space, designed to impress new species with the wealth and power of the assembly. Holographic displays showed images of thousands of worlds. Comfortable chairs had been prepared for the humans. Carter sat down without showing any reaction to the impressive surroundings. Moore stood behind her, his hands clasped behind his back. Began his presentation. He explained the history of the assembly. He described the benefits of membership, trade agreements that would make humanity rich, technology that would advance their civilization by centuries, military protection from any threat, a seat on the Outer Council, giving them a voice in galactic affairs. It was, he explained, the most generous offer ever made to a new species. Humanity would gain everything and lose nothing. Carter listened without interrupting. She asked a few questions about the specific terms. What were the trade requirements? What military obligations came with membership? What restrictions would be placed on human expansion? Answered each question carefully. Yes, there were some requirements. Members had to open their markets to assembly trade. They had to contribute ships and soldiers to peacekeeping forces. They could not expand into territory claimed by other members. These were small prices to pay for the benefits of membership. When he finished speaking, Carter was silent for a long moment. Then she stood up from her chair. "Thank you for your offer, Ambassador," she said. Her voice was calm and polite. "Humanity respectfully declines." Blinked all 4 of his eyes. He was not sure he had heard correctly. In 300 years of diplomatic service, no species had ever refused membership. Not once, not ever. "I apologize," he said. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. The benefits of joining the assembly are—" "We understood perfectly," interrupted. Her voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it. "We decline, All of it, the trade agreements, the technology sharing, the council seat, everything. But surely you must have concerns we can address, questions we can answer. Carter smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Our only concern is that you leave our space and never return. Humanity has no interest in diplomacy with the Galactic Assembly. Not now, not ever. Felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Confusion. Complete and total confusion. This was not how first contact was supposed to go. Every species wanted what the Assembly offered. Every species was eager to join. "If I may ask," he said slowly, why would you reject such a generous offer?" Carter looked at him with those sharp human eyes. "Because we have studied your assembly, ambassador. We know what happens to species that join. They lose themselves. Their cultures fade. Their independence disappears. They become just another piece in your great machine. The assembly brings peace and prosperity to all its members. The assembly brings stagnation and control. Your members have forgotten how to think for themselves, how to fight for themselves, how to be themselves." Carter shook her head. "Humanity will not make that mistake." She turned and walked toward the door. Moore followed without a word. "Wait," called out. "We can negotiate. We can adjust the terms. Surely there is something humanity wants." Carter stopped at the door and looked back at him. "We want to be left alone, ambassador. That is all we have ever wanted. And that is something your assembly cannot give us, because you cannot imagine a species that does not need you." The human delegation left the Eternal Accord. Their ship jumped to faster-than-light speed before it could even compose a message to the assembly. He stood alone in the meeting room, surrounded by holographic images of 1,000 worlds, and tried to understand what had just happened. In his 300 years of diplomatic service, he had never failed a mission. He had never even come close to failing. And now, in less than an hour, a young species from a small blue planet had rejected everything the assembly had to offer. He sent his report to the assembly leadership. He told them exactly what had happened, holding nothing back. He expected them to be confused. He expected them to be disappointed. He did not expect them to be afraid. But as the news spread across 10,000 worlds, fear was exactly what the Galactic Assembly began to feel. For the first time in 12,000 years, a species had looked at everything they had built and said no. And no one knew what would happen next. The news of humanity's rejection spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours, every major news network was talking about it. Within days, it was the only thing anyone could discuss. A young species had refused the assembly. It had never happened before. No one knew what it meant. The Galactic Assembly did not give up easily. They sent more diplomatic missions. 17 different ships traveled to human space over the following weeks. Each one carried diplomats from different species. Each one offered new deals, new terms, new promises. The assembly was willing to give humanity almost anything they wanted. But the humans would not even talk to them. Every ship that entered human space was met by a small fleet of human vessels. The humans would broadcast a simple message, no communication desired. Then they would escort the diplomatic ship back to the border and watch it leave. No threats, no violence, just cold, absolute silence. On the capital world of Nexus Prime, the leaders of the assembly gathered in emergency session. The Great Council Chamber was an enormous dome that could hold representatives from all 847 member species. Today, it was packed with worried delegates. High Counselor N called the meeting to order. She was a species that looked like tall birds with colorful feathers and sharp beaks. Her crest of blue and gold feathers rose as she spoke, showing her concern. "We face a situation without precedent," she said. "A new species has rejected all contact with the assembly. We must decide how to respond." Delegate of the Empire stood to speak. He was a large reptilian creature with green scales and yellow eyes. They must want something, he said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. Every species wants something: resources, technology, protection. We simply have not found what the humans want. Ambassador, who had been called to testify before the council, shook his head. With respect, delegate, I do not believe that is true. The humans do not want anything from us. That is precisely what makes them so dangerous. Dangerous? Counselor N's feathers flattened in surprise. They have refused all contact. They have not threatened anyone. How can silence be dangerous? Took a moment to collect his thoughts. The assembly has existed for 12,000 years because every member has a reason to stay. Trade binds us together. Treaties protect us. Diplomatic channels allow us to solve problems before they become wars. Every species depends on these systems. He paused, letting his words sink in. The humans have rejected all of these systems. They exist completely outside our framework. We have no way to influence them, no way to predict their behavior, no way to control them, and that makes them the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. The chamber fell into worried silence. Far away, in a secure facility deep beneath the mountains of Earth, a very different meeting was taking place. Admiral Samuel Grant stood before the United Earth Defense Council. He was a stocky man with a shaved head and calm brown eyes. He had served in Earth's military for 30 years, rising to become the commander of all human defense forces. Behind him floated a holographic map showing human space and the surrounding regions. Red dots marked the positions of assembly diplomatic vessels that had been turned away. The assembly will not accept our refusal, Admiral Grant said. Our intelligence suggests they are already discussing their options: economic pressure, military threats, perhaps even direct invasion. Director Laura Mitchell, head of Earth's intelligence services, nodded in agreement. She was a thin woman with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. They see us as a problem that needs to be solved, and the assembly has only ever known one way to solve problems: bringing everyone under their control. Then we must be ready, said a young council member. But how? They have thousands of ships. We have barely 100. Admiral Grant smiled slightly. That is what they believe, and we have been happy to let them believe it. He touched a control and the holographic map changed. New markers appeared throughout human space: shipyards, defense stations, weapons platforms, hundreds of them hidden away from assembly sensors. We have been preparing for this moment for 50 years, Admiral Grant said. The council members stared in shock. 50 years. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel recently. How could they have been preparing for 50 years? Director Mitchell stepped forward to explain. In the year 2337, one of our deep space probes intercepted a galactic assembly communication beacon. We learned that we were not alone in the universe. We learned about the assembly and its thousands of member species. She paused, her expression grim. We also learned what happens to species that join. We studied them for decades. We watched their cultures fade away. We saw their independence disappear. We realized that joining the assembly would be the end of everything that makes humanity unique. So we prepared, Admiral Grant continued. We built ships in secret. We developed weapons that the assembly has never seen. We created an economy that needs nothing from the outside, and we waited for the day when they would find us. That day has come. The assembly will try to force us to join. They will send diplomats first, then threats, then warships, but we will be ready. Over the following months, humanity revealed its true strength. The iron boundary was established around human space. It was a network of defense stations, weapons platforms, and sensor arrays that covered every approach to human territory. Any ship that crossed the boundary without permission was destroyed. No warning, no communication, just immediate, overwhelming firepower. The first assembly ship to test the boundary was a small trading vessel that had gotten lost near human space. It crossed the invisible line and was immediately targeted by a dozen weapons platforms. The ship tried to flee, but it was too slow. It was reduced to debris in seconds. The assembly was horrified. They demanded explanations. They called for humanity to answer for this act of aggression. Humanity said nothing. More ships were lost. Some were military scouts trying to gather intelligence. Others were civilian vessels that had strayed too close. All of them met the same fate. The iron boundary was absolute. On Nexus Prime, the Assembly leadership watched in growing fear. They had never encountered a species like this. The humans did not talk. They did not negotiate. They did not threaten or demand or explain. They simply acted with cold efficiency and deadly precision. High Counselor N called another emergency session. This time, the mood in the chamber was not confusion. It was fear. "We must do something," said Delegate. "They are killing our citizens. They are defying everything the Assembly stands for." "What do you suggest?" asked another delegate. "They will not talk to us. They will not negotiate. What options do we have?" Counselor N's feathers were flat against her head, a sign of deep anxiety. "There is only one option left, one that the Assembly has not considered in 4,000 years." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what she meant. "We must prepare for war." 3 years passed after humanity sealed itself behind the iron boundary. 3 years of silence. 3 years of mystery. The humans did not send messages. They did not respond to communications. They simply existed behind their wall of weapons, completely cut off from the rest of the galaxy. The Galactic Assembly tried to continue as normal. They held their meetings. They made their trade agreements. They pretended that humanity was just a small problem on the edge of known space, nothing to worry about. But the truth was different. The humans had changed everything simply by saying no. It started with small questions. In bars and meeting halls across the galaxy, people began to wonder. If the humans could refuse the assembly, why could they not do the same? What would happen if other species decided they no longer wanted to follow assembly rules? They were the first to speak up publicly. They were a small species from the outer rim. They had been assembly members for 2,000 years. Their delegate, a clicking creature named L, requested permission to address the council. "For 2,000 years they have been loyal members," L said. His voice was made of clicks and buzzes, translated by machines so others could understand. "We have paid our tribute. We have sent our young to die in peacekeeping forces. We have followed every rule." He paused, his compound eyes scanning the chamber. "And what have we received in return? We have watched our culture fade. Our traditions have been forgotten. Our children no longer know the songs of our ancestors. They know only the gray sameness of assembly civilization." Counselor N shifted uncomfortably on her seat. "The assembly provides many benefits: protection, trade, technology." "The humans have none of these things," L replied. "Yet they seem capable of protecting themselves. They have built a civilization that needs nothing from the outside. Perhaps the assembly provides less than it claims." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Some delegates shouted at L to sit down. Others demanded he be removed from the council. But some, a growing number, listened in thoughtful silence. Within a year, the cracks in the assembly had grown into fractures. 14 species formally requested to renegotiate their membership terms. They wanted fewer obligations, more independence, the right to make their own choices. The assembly leadership refused. The rules were the rules, they said. They applied to everyone equally, no exceptions. 8 more species began making quiet inquiries about establishing contact with humanity. They sent secret messages toward the iron boundary, hoping the humans would respond. The humans did not respond, but the fact that these species were trying showed how far things had fallen. High Counselor N knew she had to act. The assembly was falling apart. If something was not done soon, the union that had lasted 12,000 years would collapse within a generation. She called a secret meeting of the military council. Only the 5 great powers were invited: the Dominion, the Collective, the Empire, the Syndicate of Free Traders, and the ancient Eth hegemony. They met in a secure chamber deep beneath the council building. No recordings were allowed. No witnesses. What they discussed would never appear in any official record. "The humans are a cancer," N said, her feathers raised in anger. "Their existence spreads doubt and disorder wherever their influence reaches. Species that never questioned the assembly before are now demanding changes, all because one primitive species had the arrogance to say no." Admiral Eth of the Empire, a massive reptile covered in battle scars, spoke carefully. "What do you propose?" "War," N said simply. "We must break the iron boundary and force humanity to submit. We must show the galaxy that rejecting the assembly has consequences." "The assembly has not fought a true war in 4,000 years," Eth said. "Our fleets are designed for peacekeeping, not conquest. We have no experience with this kind of warfare." "Then we will learn, or we will hire those who know how to fight. The galaxy is full of mercenaries. We will gather the largest fleet ever assembled and crush the humans." General of the Eth hegemony, an ancient being whose species had been spacefaring when most others were still living in caves, leaned forward. "And if they are stronger than we expect? The humans have been preparing for this for decades. We know nothing about their true capabilities." "Then we will destroy them," N said coldly. "If they cannot be controlled, they must be eliminated. The galaxy must see that defying the assembly leads only to death." The vote was held in silence. One by one, the representatives of the 5 great powers agreed. War would come. Over the following months, the Enlightenment Armada was assembled. Ships were called from across the galaxy. Warships that had not seen action in centuries were pulled from storage and made ready. Mercenary fleets were hired at enormous cost. Training exercises were conducted in secret. When the fleet was finally complete, it numbered 3,200 vessels. It was the largest military force assembled in 4,000 years. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, carriers, weapons platforms, and troop transports. The combined might of a galaxy gathered together for one purpose: to break humanity. Admiral was chosen to lead the armada. He was like N, a career military officer who had spent centuries studying ancient warfare. He believed in the mission. The humans were a threat to galactic stability. They had to be brought under control or destroyed. The armada gathered at the edge of human space. 3,000 ships hung in the darkness, waiting for the order to advance. Aboard the flagship, Admiral addressed his commanders. "Today we restore order to the galaxy," he said. "The humans have the assembly for too long. They have killed our citizens. They have spread chaos and doubt. This ends now." He looked at the tactical display, showing the iron boundary ahead. "We have overwhelming force. They cannot possibly match our numbers. We will break through their defenses, destroy their military capability, and force them to accept assembly membership. Any resistance will be crushed without mercy." The commanders nodded in agreement. They had seen the intelligence reports. The humans had perhaps 200 ships at most. Against 3,000 they had no chance. What the commanders did not know was that the intelligence reports were wrong. Humanity had not been hiding behind the iron boundary in fear. They had been waiting, preparing, building. On the human flagship Constellation, Admiral watched the enemy fleet assemble. She was a small woman with black hair and eyes that had seen too much. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. 3,200 ships, reported her tactical officer Stone. "They are forming a standard assault formation." Admiral smiled. "Standard, that is their first mistake." She activated the fleet-wide communication channel. Every human ship, every defense platform, every weapons station heard her voice. All stations, this is Admiral, the enemy has come at last. They think we are weak. They think we will break. They think wrong. She paused, watching the enemy fleet begin its advance. Today we show the galaxy what humanity truly is. All ships, prepare for battle. The trap was set. The galaxy's greatest armada was about to fly straight into it. The Enlightenment Armada crossed the iron boundary at exactly noon, Galactic Standard Time. 3,200 ships moved forward in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready. Admiral watched from his flagship, confident that victory was certain. The human defenders appeared on his sensors moments later. 200 ships, just as intelligence had predicted. They were arranged in a defensive line across the main approach to human space. It was a brave but hopeless gesture. "Signal the fleet," Admiral commanded. "All ships advance. Destroy any vessel that does not surrender." The armada surged forward. Thousands of weapons locked onto the human defenders. In moments, this would all be over. Then the universe seemed to explode. The first wave of human weapons came from directions the armada had not expected. Weapons platforms that had been hidden in asteroid fields. Missile batteries concealed beneath the surfaces of dead moons. Ships that had been running silent, invisible to sensors, suddenly powering up and attacking. Admiral watched in horror as his formation began to fall apart. Ships that had been flying in perfect order were suddenly spinning out of control, their systems disabled by weapons he had never seen before. Other ships simply vanished in balls of fire as human missiles found their targets. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Where are these attacks coming from?" "Everywhere, Admiral," his tactical officer replied, his voice shaking. "They are everywhere." On the Constellation, Admiral directed the battle with calm precision. Every maneuver, every weapon system, every tactic had been planned and practiced for decades. The humans were not fighting a desperate defense. They were executing a carefully designed trap. "Wolf Packs Alpha through Gamma, begin your attack runs," she ordered. "Focus on their command ships. Take out their leadership." Small, fast human attack craft shot through the chaos of battle. They moved in perfect coordination, dozens of ships acting as one. They targeted the largest enemy vessels, the ones carrying admirals and generals. One by one, the assembly's command structure was torn apart. "Enemy flagship identified," Stone reported. "Bearing 275, range decreasing." "All main batteries target that ship," Admiral commanded. "Fire when ready." The Constellation's weapons spoke. Massive energy beams lanced across space, striking the flagship. Its shields held for a moment, then failed. The ship broke apart in a cascade of explosions. Admiral died without ever understanding what had gone wrong. The battle lasted 47 hours. 47 hours of constant fighting, of ships dying in fire and silence, of the galaxy's greatest military force being systematically destroyed. The humans used tactics the assembly had never seen. Their ships were faster, more maneuverable, more deadly. Their weapons bypassed shields that had been considered unbreakable. Their electronic warfare systems turned enemy ships against each other, causing chaos in the assembly ranks. And at the center of it all was the Constellation and her sister ships. Massive dreadnoughts that could absorb damage that would have destroyed a dozen assembly vessels. They moved through the battle like wolves among sheep, dealing death wherever they went. By the end of the first day, a third of the armada had been destroyed. By the end of the second day, the number had risen to half. The surviving commanders tried to coordinate a retreat, but the humans would not let them go. Admiral Eth of the Empire, one of the few senior officers still alive, took command of the remaining ships. He ordered a full retreat, abandoning any pretense of continuing the attack. Survival was the only goal now. But the humans pursued. They chased the fleeing ships out of human space and into assembly territory. Any vessel too slow to escape was destroyed. Any ship that tried to fight back was overwhelmed. The pursuit continued for another day. When Admiral finally ordered her ships to stop, they were deep inside assembly space. The iron boundary was far behind them, and the constellation was in orbit around Nexus Prime itself, the capital of the Galactic Assembly, home to the Great Council Chamber, the heart of galactic civilization for 12,000 years. And now, a human warship hung above it, its weapons pointed at the surface. On the ground, panic had taken hold. The streets of the capital city were filled with terrified citizens. The council members had fled to underground bunkers, praying that the humans would not destroy them. Admiral's face appeared on every screen on the planet, on every ship in orbit, on every world that could receive the transmission. The entire galaxy watched as she spoke. "This is Admiral of the United Earth Navy." Her voice was calm, cold, utterly without emotion. 47 hours ago, the Galactic Assembly sent a fleet of 3,200 ships to conquer humanity. That fleet no longer exists. She let the words hang in the silence. 2,893 of your vessels have been destroyed. Your military capability has been reduced by approximately 60% in a single engagement. The greatest military force assembled in 4,000 years has been annihilated. On Nexus Prime, in the underground bunker where she had taken shelter, High Counselor N watched the transmission with tears running down her feathered face. This was her fault. She had pushed for this war. She had believed victory was certain. And now her civilization was burning. "We did not want this," Admiral continued. "We asked only to be left alone. You refused. You decided that humanity must be forced to join your assembly. You were wrong. Humanity rejects your diplomacy. We reject your trade. We reject your treaties and councils and your slow decline into irrelevance. We choose to stand alone, to forge our own destiny, to remain free." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "This is our final warning. Any vessel that crosses into human space will be destroyed without communication, without mercy, without exception. We will not negotiate. We will not compromise. We will not yield. Leave us alone, or we will finish what you started today." The transmission ended. The constellation and her escorts turned away from Nexus Prime. In moments, they had jumped to faster-than-light speed and vanished. In the council bunker, the representatives of 847 species sat in stunned silence. Some were crying. Others simply stared at nothing, unable to process what had happened. The greatest military force in galactic history had been destroyed in less than 2 days. The species that had done it had made it look easy, and they had done it while holding back, fighting defensively, never using their full strength. Delegate of the Empire was one of the few military council members who had survived. His scales had turned pale with shock. "What have we done?" he whispered. "What have we awakened?" No one had an answer. The battle of the Iron Boundary was over. The Galactic Assembly had learned a lesson it would never forget, and the universe would never be the same. 10 years passed after the battle of the Iron Boundary. 10 years of change, 10 years of fear, 10 years of a galaxy learning to live in a universe where humanity existed. The Galactic Assembly survived, but it was a shadow of what it had once been. The defeat of the Enlightenment Armada had broken something fundamental. For 12,000 years, the Assembly had promised its members protection, security, safety in numbers. That promise had died above Nexus Prime, where a human fleet had proven that the Assembly could not protect anyone, not even itself. Species began to leave. They were first, withdrawing their membership entirely. They returned to there and sealed their borders, choosing isolation over false promises of protection. Others followed. Within 5 years, nearly 100 species had left the assembly. Those who remained formed smaller groups, regional alliances that looked out for their own interests. The Great Council Chamber on Nexus Prime, which had once hosted representatives from across the galaxy, now stood half empty. Sessions that had once lasted days now ended in hours. There was simply less to discuss. High Counselor N had been removed from power in disgrace. She had pushed for the war. She had promised victory. The blood of millions was on her feathers. She spent her remaining years in exile, watching from afar as the civilization she had tried to save crumbled around her. Her replacement was a moderate named as. He was like her but younger and more cautious. His policy toward humanity was simple: leave them alone, completely alone. No diplomatic missions, no trade offers, no attempts at contact of any kind. If the humans wanted isolation, they would have it. The iron boundary remained. Human ships patrolled the border constantly, watching for any sign of intrusion. The weapons platforms still worked, still ready to destroy anything that crossed into human space without permission. For 10 years, no one had dared to test them. On Earth, the celebrations had long since ended. The people who had fought in the war were getting older. Admiral had retired to a small farm in the mountains. She grew vegetables and watched the stars at night, content to spend her final years in peace. The great fleets that had defended humanity were still maintained. Crews trained constantly, keeping their skills sharp. New ships were built to replace those lost in battle, but everyone hoped they would never be needed again. Carter was now Secretary General of the United Earth Government. Her hair had turned completely gray, and her face showed the weight of difficult decisions. She had spent 10 years watching the galaxy from behind the iron boundary. 10 years of silence, 10 years of isolation. On the 10th anniversary of the battle, she gave an address to the Global Assembly. Leaders from every nation on Earth watched as she spoke. "We have done what we set out to do," she said. "We have proven that humanity can stand alone, that we do not need the protection of others, that we are capable of defending ourselves against any threat." She paused, looking out at the faces of Earth's leaders. But isolation is not victory. It is only survival, and humanity has never been content with mere survival. For 10 years, we have watched the galaxy from behind our walls. We have seen the assembly fracture. We have seen new alliances form. We have seen species that once feared us begin to respect us. The balance of power has changed, and now we must decide what comes next. She took a deep breath before continuing. "Today, I announce a change in our policy. The iron boundary will remain. Our military readiness will not decrease, but we are opening a single point of contact, a place where representatives of other species may come to speak with us." The assembly erupted in surprised murmurs. "Not to negotiate membership in any organization," continued, raising her hand for silence. "Not to sign treaties or trade agreements, simply to talk, to understand one another, to see if there is a better way forward than walls and weapons. We rejected diplomacy because we saw what it had become, a tool of control, a way to absorb species into a dying civilization. But diplomacy does not have to be that. It can be a conversation between equals, an exchange of ideas between free peoples. Humanity chooses to remain free. We will never join the assembly or any organization like it, but we are willing at last to listen." The news spread across the galaxy within hours. After a decade of absolute silence, humanity was opening a door, a small door, a heavily guarded door, but a door all the same. The first species to accept the invitation was the collective. It seemed fitting somehow. They had made first contact all those years ago. Their ambassador had been the first to hear humanity say no. Their new ambassador was named. He was young by standards, barely a century old. He traveled to the human contact station alone, following careful instructions about where to go and what not to do. More was waiting for him. The young man who had stood behind Carter at that first meeting was now a senior diplomat, his brown hair touched with gray at the temples. He smiled as approached. "Welcome," said. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for receiving me," replied. His 4 eyes studied the human with curiosity. "We have learned much from your example these past 10 years. What have you learned?" Considered the question carefully. That strength does not require aggression. That independence does not require submission. That a species can chart its own course without permission from others. Nodded slowly. "Those are good lessons." "There is one more," added. "We have learned that fear makes people do foolish things. The assembly attacked you because they were afraid of what your existence meant for their power. They should have simply listened." "Maybe they will now," said. They talked for hours, not about treaties or trade agreements, just about their worlds, their histories, their hopes for the future. It was the kind of conversation that should have happened 10 years ago, before the fear and the war and the death. When finally departed, he carried with him something more valuable than any trade deal. He carried understanding, and he carried hope. Other species followed, slowly at first, then in growing numbers. They came to the human contact station and they talked. Some came with grievances. Some came with curiosity. Some came simply to see the strange species that had the galaxy and won. Not all the conversations went well. Old wounds do not heal easily. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. There were arguments and misunderstandings and moments when it seemed the door might close again forever. But it did not close. On the 20th anniversary of the Battle of the Iron Boundary, a remarkable thing happened. Representatives from 37 species gathered at the human contact station, not for a formal summit, not for treaty negotiations, just to talk, to share ideas, to learn from one another. Carter, now in her 80s, attended the gathering. She sat in a corner and watched the aliens and humans mingling together, sharing food and stories and laughter. Moore sat down beside her. "We did it," he said quietly. "We actually did it." Smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "We proved that humanity could stand alone, that we could force the galaxy to respect us. But this," she gestured at the crowded room, "this is something better." "What is it?" Watched a young human officer laughing with a group of diplomats. She watched an artist showing her work to a circle of fascinated viewers. She watched species that had once been enemies sitting together in peace. "This is what diplomacy should have been all along," she said. "Conversation between equals, understanding without submission, cooperation without control." She leaned back in her chair, her old bones aching but her heart full. Humanity rejected diplomacy because it had become something ugly, something that destroyed independence and erased cultures. But we did not reject connection. We did not reject understanding. We just demanded that it happen on equal terms. And now it is. Carter closed her eyes and smiled. And now it is. The galaxy had changed. The old order had fallen. Something new was rising in its place. It was messy and complicated and uncertain, but it was built on respect instead of fear, on choice instead of coercion, on the simple idea that every species, no matter how small or strange, had the right to determine its own destiny. Humanity had rejected diplomacy, and in doing so, they had taught the galaxy what diplomacy could truly be. The universe would never be the same, and maybe, just maybe, it would be better.